This is the true story of a construction worker's courage. A cry for help echoed across the construction site, cutting through the relentless roar of jackhammers and the grinding of steel against concrete. For a split second, every worker froze. Dust hung in the air like a gray curtain, blurring the unfinished skeleton of the 40-story building rising above them. Then the scream came again, desperate, terrified, unmistakably human. "Help! Somebody please!" Marcus Bennett dropped the rebar he was carrying and sprinted toward the sound before his brain had time to weigh the danger. 20 years in construction had taught him one lesson above all others. Every second mattered. Hesitation was the difference between a close call and a funeral. Workers pointed frantically toward the eastern scaffold. "It's Liam." The platform gave way. "Oh God." Marcus looked up. Nearly 100 feet above the ground, a narrow aluminum platform had collapsed. One side had snapped free from its anchor bolts, leaving it hanging vertically against the side of the building. A young apprentice clung desperately to a single steel cable. His orange safety vest fluttered violently in the wind. Liam Carter, 23 years old, 3 weeks into his first construction job. His safety harness had caught, but not correctly. Instead of hanging securely from an overhead anchor, the twisted lanyard had wrapped around a protruding steel beam, leaving him dangling awkwardly several feet below the broken scaffold. The cable groaned. Marcus didn't need an engineer to tell him what that sound meant. It wasn't going to hold forever. "Call emergency services," Marcus shouted. "They're already coming. Get me a rescue rope." "No one's certified for high-angle rescue." "I didn't ask if you're certified." Someone disappeared into the equipment trailer while others stared helplessly upward. Liam's hands were slipping. His terrified eyes searched the crowd below. "I can't hold on," he screamed. Marcus's heart pounded. He had seen accidents before. Too many. Some stayed with him forever. 15 years earlier, he had watched his closest friend fall from the 6th floor after a corroded anchor failed. The image had haunted every night since. The company had changed its policies afterward, but no policy could erase the memory of standing powerless while someone you cared about disappeared into empty space. Not again. Never again. The rescue rope arrived. Marcus clipped it onto his harness while another foreman grabbed his shoulder. "Marcus, don't. We have to. The fire department is 6 minutes away." Marcus looked back up. The steel cable holding Liam jerked violently. It wasn't going to last 60 seconds. He tightened his gloves. "I don't think Liam has 6 minutes." Without waiting for permission, Marcus raced toward the stair tower inside the unfinished building. "Marcus!" someone yelled after him. He ignored them. Concrete dust exploded beneath his boots as he climbed flight after flight. 10 floors. 15. 20. His lungs burned, but adrenaline drowned out the pain. Every landing reminded him of another memory. Another accident. Another family receiving terrible news. Construction workers rarely feared hard work. They feared phone calls that began with the words, "There's been an incident." Marcus reached the 26th floor and burst through an opening facing the damaged scaffold. The wind hit him immediately. Cold. Violent. The broken platform swung several feet below him. Liam hung beneath it, trembling uncontrollably. "Marcus!" Liam cried. "I'm here. I don't want to die." Marcus forced himself to sound calm. "You're not going to." Even if he wasn't sure it was true. He quickly anchored one end of the rescue rope around a massive structural column, checking the knot twice before clipping the other end to his harness. There was no approved rescue plan. No instruction manual. Only instinct. He climbed over the edge. Below him stretched almost 300 feet of empty air. Cars looked like toys. People looked like dots. The wind pulled at his body, trying to twist him away from the building. Slowly, carefully, Marcus lowered himself toward Liam. The young apprentice wasn't crying anymore. Shock had replaced fear. His face had turned ghostly white. "I can't feel my legs," Liam whispered. "Don't worry about your legs. My hands. They're shaking." "That's okay. I think I'm slipping." Marcus looked at the damaged cable. Several strands had already snapped. Only a few twisted wires remained intact. Time was running out. "You need to listen to me," Marcus said firmly. "I am. When I reach you, don't grab me." "What? If you panic and grab me, we'll both fall." Liam nodded weakly. "I'll try." "No. Promise me." "I promise." Marcus descended another few feet. The wind gusted violently. His body slammed against the concrete wall. Pain shot through his shoulder. He ignored it. Only another 6 feet separated them. Then 5. Then 4. Below, dozens of workers watched in complete silence. Even the machines had stopped. The entire construction site held its breath. Marcus extended one arm. So close. Liam stretched toward him. Their fingertips nearly touched. Then came the sound every experienced construction worker dreaded. Metal tearing apart. The remaining strands of the support cable exploded with a sharp snap. Liam dropped. For one horrifying instant, he disappeared beneath Marcus. A chorus of screams erupted from below. But the tangled harness caught again, this time only by a twisted buckle hooked around the edge of the broken platform. It wasn't designed to hold weight that way. The buckle began bending open. Marcus reacted without thinking. He swung outward using his own rope, reaching desperately through empty air. His fingers caught Liam's jacket. Not enough. The fabric ripped. Marcus lunged farther, stretching every muscle in his body. This time he caught Liam's wrist. Hold on. I've got you. The sudden weight nearly pulled Marcus away from the building. His safety rope tightened violently. The anchor groaned. Above them, concrete dust drifted from the overloaded connection point. Marcus looked upward for half a second. The anchor was holding. Barely. Below him, Liam dangled entirely by one arm. The bent buckle finally snapped free. Now Marcus was the only thing keeping him from falling nearly 300 feet. Pain exploded through Marcus's shoulder. It felt like it had been ripped from its socket. Still he refused to let go. You have to clip into me. Marcus shouted. I can't reach. You have to. My arm won't move. Marcus could already feel his grip weakening. His gloves were slick with sweat. The muscles in his forearm trembled violently. Above them, another worker appeared at the edge of the building. Then another. Then 3 more. Someone had brought additional ropes. We've got you, one of them yelled. Marcus almost smiled. For the first time since climbing over the edge, hope returned. Not because he believed he could save Liam alone, but because he realized he no longer had to. The workers above moved with astonishing speed. Years of lifting steel, pouring concrete, and trusting one another with their lives had forged an instinct that no classroom could teach. Within seconds, 2 ropes were anchored around structural columns, while another worker crawled over the edge without hesitation. It was Eddie Morales, 58 years old, 36 years in construction. Marcus had worked beside him for almost 2 decades. You old fool, Eddie shouted through gritted teeth. Couldn't wait 5 damn minutes for the fire department. Marcus laughed despite the pain. I figured you'd complain if I let the kid fall. Damn right I would. Eddie lowered himself until he was close enough to clip a secondary line onto Marcus's harness. Got you. The words carried more weight than the rope itself. Marcus finally allowed himself one deep breath. Now there were 2 anchors instead of 1. But Liam was still hanging by Marcus's exhausted arm. His face had gone pale. His lips trembled uncontrollably. I can't. Stay with me, Marcus ordered. I can't feel my fingers. You don't need to. Marcus shifted his body carefully, ignoring the agony in his shoulder. Every movement sent sharp bolts of pain through his arm, but little by little he managed to bring Liam closer. Take this. He unclipped a spare carabiner from his harness and pushed it toward Liam. The young apprentice stared at it blankly. I don't. You don't have to think. Marcus's voice became calm, almost fatherly. Just clip the silver piece into the ring on your harness. My hands. I know. They won't listen. Marcus realized Liam wasn't simply scared. He was in shock. His body had begun shutting down. Below them, sirens echoed in the distance. Too far away. Too late to matter. Eddie inched closer. I've got an idea. He reached down with one boot, bracing himself against the wall. Marcus, swing him toward me. Easy for you to say. You've always liked impossible jobs. Marcus smiled weakly. Guess I never learned. Using every ounce of strength left in his body, Marcus shifted sideways. Liam swung gently through the air like a pendulum. Not enough. Again. This time, Eddie caught the back of Liam's harness. I've got him. Relief flooded Marcus, so suddenly his knees nearly gave out. Together, they clipped the secondary rope directly onto Liam's safety ring. The metallic clicks sounded louder than the wind. Liam was finally secured. Marcus released his grip. His right arm fell uselessly to his side. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. I think, Marcus muttered through clenched teeth. My shoulder's gone. No kidding, Eddie answered. You were holding 200 pounds with one arm. I've lifted heavier. not hanging off a skyscraper. The workers above began hauling carefully. One line lifted Liam. The other stabilized Marcus and Eddie. Inch by inch, the three men rose toward the unfinished floor. The moment Liam's boots touched solid concrete, he collapsed. His entire body shook violently. A paramedic team, having just arrived, rushed toward him. One of them knelt immediately. "Can you hear me?" Liam nodded. "Breathe slowly." Another medic turned toward Marcus. "You're next." Marcus shook his head. "The kid first. The kid is alive because of you." Marcus looked across the floor. Liam was staring at him. Their eyes met. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Liam whispered two simple words. "Thank you." Marcus smiled. "No." He shook his head gently. "When you get 20 years older, you save somebody else." The construction site remained closed for the rest of the day. Safety investigators photographed every broken bolt, every fractured weld, every damaged plank. Initial reports suggested metal fatigue. But Marcus wasn't interested in reports. He sat in the back of an ambulance with his arm in a sling while a medic examined his shoulder. "You've dislocated it." "I figured. And probably torn a few ligaments." Marcus sighed. "My wife is going to kill me." The medic laughed. "I think she'll be happy you're alive." "You haven't met my wife." Almost on cue, his phone rang. The screen read, "Emily." Marcus stared at it. The medic grinned. "Go ahead." Marcus answered cautiously. "Hey." Silence. Then Emily spoke in a voice far calmer than he expected. "I saw the helicopters." Marcus closed his eyes. "The news already?" "The entire city already." "I'm okay." "I know." "How?" "They interviewed one of your co-workers." Marcus swallowed. "He said my husband climbed over the side of a building to save someone." Another pause. Then came the sentence Marcus dreaded. "What were you thinking?" He looked down at the bandage wrapped around his shoulder. "I wasn't." "I know." Her voice cracked. "That's what scares me." Marcus had no answer. Because she was right. He hadn't thought. He had simply moved. Just as he always had. That evening, local television stations replayed shaky cell phone footage captured by workers on the ground. The video spread rapidly online. Millions watched as two tiny figures hung from the side of a skyscraper. Comment sections filled with words like hero, legend, real man, and guardian angel. Marcus hated every one of them. He wasn't a hero. Heroes were uniforms. Heroes flew helicopters. Heroes ran into burning buildings. He was just a construction foreman who happened to be nearby. The next morning, he arrived at the hospital carrying a small paper bag. Inside were two things: a cheeseburger and a pair of heavy-duty work gloves. Liam looked surprised. "You came." Marcus handed him the bag. "Heard hospital food is terrible." Liam laughed for the first time since the accident. "It is." Marcus pulled up a chair. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Liam broke the silence. "I almost quit." "When?" "Yesterday." Marcus frowned. "Before the accident. I called my mom during lunch." "What happened?" "I told her I didn't think construction was for me." Marcus leaned back. "And now?" Liam stared at the gloves resting beside the burger. "I don't know." Marcus nodded slowly. "When I was your age, I quit 3 times." "You did?" "Oh, absolutely." "Why?" Marcus smiled. "The first time, because I thought the work was too hard. The second, I thought the pay wasn't worth it. And the third." Marcus looked out the hospital window. "My best friend died on a job site." Liam remained silent. "I couldn't walk onto another construction site after that." "So why did you come back?" Marcus thought for a long moment. "Because buildings matter." Liam looked confused. Marcus continued. "Schools matter. Hospitals matter. Bridges matter. Homes matter. They don't appear by magic. They exist because ordinary people decide every morning to put on hard hats and build them." Liam listened carefully. Marcus pointed toward the city skyline outside. "You see those buildings?" Liam nodded. "Someone's father built them. Someone's mother poured those foundations. Someone missed birthdays. Someone worked through freezing winters. Construction isn't just steel and concrete. It's leaving something behind that says, 'I was here.'" Liam's eyes filled with tears again. This time, they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of understanding. Marcus stood to leave. At the door, he stopped. "Oh." Liam looked up. "Those gloves. They're mine. Worn them for 12 years. I want you to have them." "I can't." "You can." Marcus smiled. "But only if you promise me one thing." "Anything." Marcus's expression turned serious. "When you're the experienced guy, and some scared kid needs help. You don't hesitate. Liam looked down at the weathered gloves in his lap, then back at Marcus. I promise. Marcus nodded once. He believed him, and somehow, that promise meant even more than the rescue itself. A week later, Marcus stood in his backyard with his arms still secured in a sling, trying unsuccessfully to trim the rose bushes one-handed. Emily watched from the kitchen window, shaking her head with the familiar expression that meant she was equal parts annoyed and relieved. You know, she called through the open window, most people use injuries as an excuse to rest. Marcus smiled. Rest is overrated. You've been home for 4 days. I've reorganized the garage. I noticed. I fixed the back gate. I noticed. I sharpened every garden tool. I definitely noticed. Emily stepped outside carrying 2 mugs of coffee. You don't know how to sit still, do you? Marcus accepted the mug with his good hand. I've been moving since I was 16. So maybe it's time to stop. He looked across the neighborhood. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk. A mail carrier waved from across the street. Somewhere in the distance, another construction crane slowly rotated against the morning sky. I wouldn't know how. Emily slipped her hand into his. You scared me. I know. I thought. She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. I'm still here. For now. She smiled sadly. For now. Across town, Liam had become something of an unexpected celebrity among the crew. Every worker greeted him with the same question. How are you holding up? Some slapped him on the shoulder. Others joked that he had already earned enough stories for an entire career. But behind the smiles lingered something deeper. Respect. Not because he had almost died. Because he came back. 3 weeks after the accident, Liam walked through the site entrance wearing a brand new hard hat. The conversation stopped. A few workers applauded quietly. Someone whistled. Eddie walked over carrying a thermos. Thought you'd run. I almost did. But Liam glanced at the half-finished tower rising into the blue sky. I remembered what Marcus said. Buildings matter. Eddie grinned. He's been giving speeches again? It wasn't really a speech. No. Eddie laughed. It never is. Marcus returned to work a month later. Company policy required medical clearance. His shoulder still ached every morning. Some movements would probably never feel the same again. He accepted that. Construction workers learned early that every scar carried a story. As Marcus entered the site trailer, everyone fell strangely quiet. He frowned. What? The project manager stepped forward, holding a small wooden box. We've been waiting. For what? The man opened the box. Inside rested a polished brass nameplate. It wasn't fancy, just a simple rectangle mounted on dark walnut. The engraving read, Marcus Bennett for courage under impossible circumstances. Marcus immediately shook his head. No. The project manager smiled. Too late. I don't want this. We know. I was just doing my job. No. The room became silent. You were doing far more than your job. Marcus looked around. Every face staring back at him belonged to someone who had spent years working beside him. People who understood exactly what had happened. People who knew how easily the story could have ended differently. Eddie finally spoke. You remember Danny? Marcus's smile disappeared. Danny Harris. His best friend. The man who had fallen 15 years earlier. Marcus nodded. We couldn't save Danny. No. But we saved Liam. The room remained silent. Eddie placed the plaque into Marcus's hands. Sometimes that's enough. Marcus stared at the engraved letters for a long time before quietly whispering, I wish Danny could have been here. So do we. A month later, the city council announced a public ceremony honoring emergency responders involved in several recent rescues. Someone had quietly added Marcus's name to the list. He almost refused to attend. Emily insisted. You don't have to like attention. I don't. But sometimes people need examples. I'm not an example. You are. I just reacted. Emily smiled. Exactly. The ceremony took place on the steps of City Hall beneath a cloudless autumn sky. Firefighters stood beside police officers. Paramedics chatted with search and rescue volunteers. Marcus felt completely out of place. His faded work boots contrasted sharply with polished uniforms. When his name was announced, he reluctantly walked onto the stage. The mayor handed him a framed certificate. Cameras flashed. Applause echoed across the square. Marcus leaned toward the microphone. I wasn't planning to say anything. The audience laughed softly. But if I may. He paused. I'd like to dedicate this to every construction worker who goes to work before sunrise. Another pause. The men and women who build schools they'll never study in. Hospitals they'll never be treated in. Bridges they'll probably cross without anyone knowing who built them. He looked toward the crowd where dozens of workers from his company had gathered. They don't ask for applause. They don't ask for medals. They just ask to go home at the end of the day. Silence spread across the square. So if you really want to honor someone, honor the people who wear hard hats every morning, because they build the places where the rest of life happens. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the applause began, slowly at first, then louder. People rose to their feet, not for Marcus alone, for every unseen worker represented by his words. Winter arrived earlier than expected. The tower they had spent nearly 2 years building finally reached completion. The last beam had been bolted into place. The glass reflected the evening sun like liquid gold. Workers gathered on the roof for one final photograph. Helmets, safety vests, dust-covered boots, weathered faces. Someone handed Marcus a marker. Your turn. Tradition dictated that every crew member signed the final structural beam before it disappeared forever behind walls and ceilings. Marcus uncapped the marker. Instead of writing only his name, he wrote something else beneath it. Go home safe. Just 3 words. Simple, honest, necessary. One by one, the others added their signatures around the message. Liam stood quietly before writing his own. Then, beneath Marcus's words, he added another line. For those who didn't, Marcus noticed. Their eyes met across the beam. No words were needed. 5 years passed. The skyline changed again. New towers climbed higher. Old warehouses disappeared. Roads widened. Neighborhoods grew. Construction never truly ended. Neither did the lessons. Liam was no longer the nervous apprentice who had frozen on a broken scaffold. He had become a foreman himself. One rainy Tuesday morning, he stood on the 7th floor of another project when panicked shouting erupted below. A young worker had slipped while climbing temporary stairs. He dangled awkwardly, terrified, unable to move. Several people hesitated, waiting, unsure. Liam didn't. He grabbed a rope, checked the anchor, ran toward the edge. For just an instant, he heard Marcus's voice echoing in his memory. When you're the experienced guy, and some scared kid needs help, you don't hesitate. He smiled. I promised. And he kept that promise. Several months later, Marcus received an unexpected envelope in the mail. Inside was a photograph. It showed Liam standing beside an entire construction crew. Everyone smiled. On the back, written in neat black ink, were only a few sentences. You were wrong. You said to save somebody else when I got older. It wasn't just somebody. It was a father of 2. Because of you, his children still have their dad. Thank you for showing me what courage really looks like. Marcus lowered the letter. His eyes drifted toward the window, where another building crane slowly turned against the evening sky. For years he had believed courage meant refusing to be afraid. He finally understood the truth. Courage was hearing fear scream in your ear and choosing to climb anyway. Some buildings become landmarks. Some disappear into the skyline unnoticed. But every once in a while, long after the concrete has cured and the steel has stopped echoing, a different kind of structure remains standing. Not one built from beams or bolts. One built from a single decision. A hand extended into empty space. A promise kept. A life passed forward. And like every great foundation, it carried far more weight than anyone could see. Marcus folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. For a long time, he simply sat in silence, listening to the familiar sounds drifting in through the open window. Somewhere nearby, a hammer struck steel in a steady rhythm. A cement mixer rumbled in the distance. The city never stopped building. Emily walked into the living room carrying a fresh pot of coffee. She noticed the expression on his face before she noticed the letter in his hand. What is it? Marcus handed her the photograph without saying a word. She studied it for a moment before turning it over and reading the message on the back. By the time she finished, tears had begun to gather in her eyes. He kept his promise. Marcus nodded. He did. And because of that, another family stayed together. Marcus looked toward the fading evening light. I guess that's how it works. What do you mean? You save one person. They save another. And maybe someday, someone they'll never even meet saves another after that. Emily smiled. Like ripples. Exactly. She reached for his hand. You've always said buildings outlive the people who build them. Marcus chuckled softly. I used to believe that. And now, I think the things we teach each other last even longer. A year later, Marcus officially retired. His co-workers organized a farewell gathering inside the completed tower where everything had happened. The lobby, once nothing more than exposed concrete and steel columns, had become a breathtaking space filled with polished marble, warm lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Nearly everyone who had worked on the project came. Electricians, iron workers, crane operators, carpenters, laborers, engineers, project managers. Even several firefighters and paramedics who had responded that day stopped by to shake his hand. Liam arrived last. He was wearing a white hard hat now, the kind reserved for supervisors. Marcus noticed it immediately. Looks strange on you. Liam laughed. I was thinking the same thing. You've earned it. I hope so. The room slowly quieted as someone tapped a glass with a spoon. Eddie stood near the center of the crowd. I've known Marcus for 20 years. He paused, looking around at the familiar faces. I've seen him work in snowstorms. I've seen him work through heat waves. I've seen him stay after everyone else went home just to make sure every ladder was tied off. A few workers nodded knowingly. But if you ask Marcus what he's most proud of, he'll probably tell you it wasn't any building. Marcus lowered his head with an embarrassed smile. Eddie continued. It was every worker who made it home. Silence settled over the room. Buildings can be rebuilt. People can't. The applause that followed lasted nearly a full minute. Marcus didn't know where to look. He had never been comfortable with praise. But he understood. Something that day. The applause wasn't celebrating a single rescue. It was celebrating a lifetime spent looking out for others. Before everyone left, Liam asked Marcus to come upstairs. They rode the elevator to the 40th floor. The same floor where unfinished concrete had once been covered in dust and scattered tools was now an elegant observation deck overlooking miles of city skyline. The sun was beginning to set. Golden light reflected from countless windows. Cars flowed below like tiny streams of light. Liam walked toward one particular window. It was right here. Marcus joined him. The exact place where the broken scaffold had hung was impossible to identify now. Glass covered the exterior. Everything looked peaceful. You know, Liam said quietly, I used to have nightmares. Marcus nodded. I figured. I'd wake up feeling like I was still falling. When did they stop? Liam smiled. The day I stopped remembering the fall and started remembering the hand that caught me. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Finally, Liam reached into his backpack. I've got something. He pulled out the old work gloves Marcus had given him years earlier. They were worn thin. The leather had darkened from sweat and weather. Several stitches had been repaired by hand. I've used them on every job. Marcus smiled. I can tell. They've done their job. Liam carefully placed the gloves into Marcus's hands. I think it's time they came home. Marcus ran his fingers across the cracked leather. They weren't just gloves anymore. They were a reminder that ordinary objects sometimes carried extraordinary stories. I'll keep them. I knew you would. Several weeks later, Marcus received an invitation from a local trade school that trained young construction workers. They wanted him to speak to a graduating class. At first he declined. Public speaking wasn't his thing. Then Emily simply looked at him and said, You've spent your whole life teaching. You just never did it in a classroom. So he went. Nearly 100 students filled the auditorium. Some looked excited. Others looked nervous. Most had no idea what to expect from the quiet man standing at the podium with a faded pair of work gloves resting beside his notes. Marcus didn't use the notes. He simply picked up the gloves. I've been asked many times what the most important tool on a construction site is. He looked around the room. Some people say it's a crane. Some say a welding machine. Some say a blueprint. He held up the gloves. They're all wrong. The students leaned forward. The most important thing you'll ever bring to work is the person standing next to you. He slowly scanned the room. Because one day, you might be the reason they go home. No one moved. No one spoke. And one day, they might be the reason you do. When the speech ended, there was no dramatic applause at first. Only silence. The kind of silence that meant people were thinking. Then, one by one, the students rose to their feet. Marcus looked down, humbled. If even one of them remembered those words years later, it would be enough. That evening he drove home beneath a sky painted orange and purple by the setting sun. As he passed through the city, He recognized buildings he had helped construct over 4 decades. A school, a hospital, an apartment complex, an office tower. Thousands of people moved through those buildings every day without ever wondering who had poured the foundations or tightened the bolts hidden inside the walls. Marcus preferred it that way. The strongest parts of any structure were usually the ones no one ever saw. Perhaps people were like that, too. Not every act of courage appeared on the evening news. Not every life changed because of a dramatic rescue. Sometimes courage meant checking a safety harness one more time. Sometimes it meant speaking up when something looked wrong. Sometimes it meant refusing to cut corners. Sometimes it meant reaching out to someone who was afraid. Those choices rarely made headlines, but they saved lives all the same. Marcus pulled into his driveway just as the porch light came on. Emily opened the front door before he reached it. "How did it go?" He smiled. "I think they'll be all right." She wrapped her arms around him. "I always knew you were a builder." Marcus shook his head gently. "I built a few buildings." He looked back toward the distant skyline, where the last rays of sunlight reflected from towers of steel and glass. "But I hope I helped build a few people, too." As darkness settled over the city, construction lights flickered on across new job sites where another generation of workers prepared for another day's labor. New foundations would be poured. New beams would rise into the sky. New apprentices would learn from experienced hands. And somewhere, without ever knowing the full story, someone would choose to slow down, double-check a harness, lend a helping hand, or step forward instead of standing back. The legacy of one courageous decision would continue, not because it had been written in newspapers or engraved on plaques, but because it had quietly become part of the culture passed from one worker to the next. Marcus closed the front door behind him. The city continued building. So did the people within it.